I was wrong about the FIRE movement. I was a hater of financial independence, retire early. Why? It all came down to the brown bananas. This community of frugal savers is often described in a way that is dismissive and patronizing. I thought that they worried so much about money that it sucked the joy out of life. I thought that being really frugal was a core part of their identity, and in their quest to retire early, they were missing the forest from the trees. And I was wrong. In a world where the common narrative is that the economy is broken, no one can afford anything, and homes are out of reach, I learned firsthand that there's a group that bucks that trend. We're going to talk about this story that everything is broken, right? People are really struggling with the economy. They are struggling with inflation. They are struggling to buy homes. They are struggling with debt. And that is the pervasive narrative that exists today across the Western world. It seems like I could speak for America. Now, you have this FIRE community, financial independence, retire early. And let's kind of go through their principles again. So a few of their FIRE principles is excessive saving. They save. I've met people that save 60, 70, 80% of their income. So savings that comes with frugality. A lot of delayed gratification, predominantly through investing. The phrase VTSAX and chill. I heard that phrase so many times over the course of this conference. So delayed gratification and investing. Tax minimization. So Roth IRAs, owning real estate, things like that. And then you hit the eject switch, right? You retire early and you live on your own terms. And what was crazy about this conference was just how different the attendees were compared to traditional circles that I sit in. So the attendees of this financial independence conference were very different for a few reasons. It was just very, and I don't say this in any pejorative term, but it was just very middle class Americans. And I say that because, look, this podcast, especially when we talk about money, we're definitely talking about kind of highly educated, high earners, lawyers, bankers, finance people, entrepreneurs. And we don't really, urban and coastal and globalist, we don't really talk to the more everyday roles. You know, there was a pilot that I met, a lot of nurses and healthcare administrator and IT managers. And that was just such a big wake-up call for me personally, that like, wow, I really, I speak at a lot of financial conferences, but these are high net worth, ultra high net worth conferences where the median, net worth is in, seven figures easily. Hey, quick time out. If you're watching this video, you're probably someone who thinks deeply and intentionally about your career, about your life, and about your relationships. But sometimes you might find yourself in a place feeling stuck, unmotivated, or just rudderless. If that's you, we have a coaching program for people looking to make a bold pivot and rediscover their aliveness. Just check out radreads.co/coaching. Now back to the video. And here you had, again, and I say this with the utmost respect and admiration, very Americans with very day-to-day traditional careers, not these kind of coastal careers. So you had this diversity, this socioeconomic diversity. If I had to guess the net worth of the folks at this conference, I would say it's probably between like 300 and 600. If I had to guess, no one said it explicitly, but that's just my inference. So it's extremely diverse socioeconomically, extremely diverse in career, extremely diverse in geographic presence. Very few coastal people. And if they were kind of out, they were not living, in Manhattan. If they lived in New York City, they weren't living in Manhattan, they were living in the Bronx. If they lived in LA, they weren't living on the West Side, but they were living more inland. And so you had this geographic diversity, which led to phenomenal incredible gender diversity. I'd say it was more than half of the group were women, and racial. I would say a quarter of the attendees were African American, if I had to guess. So just this really, really beautifully diverse group of people. So these were the people attending this conference. So let's go back. It's funny because I was there not as a speaker, not as an attendee, but as a speaker. And I've been kind of, I wouldn't say anti-FIRE, but I don't espouse FIRE principles. So, or do I? Let's think about that. So in one regards, I'm a very high spender. And I live in high cost of living places, and I have not excessive, but I definitely have consumerist, materialist tendencies. For me, it's less about things and more about where I eat, how I travel, where I travel to, what I wear. So in that regards, I'm definitely not FIRE. I don't particularly, I don't budget. I don't even know how much we spend each year. I have a rough estimate. Don't budget. I don't do tax minimization, backdoor Roth IRAs. Like, I'm very aware of taxes, but I don't do that. And so in that regards, I'm very much not FIRE. However, where am I FIRE? And when I would meet people at this conference, I would say, they're like, why are you here? Everyone puts on their badge. Where are you in your financial independence journey, FI journey? And I wrote semi-retired, and in parentheses, I said, because I spend too much money. And so people, I would say maybe from the people that I met, 500 people at the conference, I'd say probably a third seemed to be financially independent. So they didn't have to work for money. So why is Khe FIRE? Why would I be considered part of that group? So a few things. One is very aggressive investing. So while I don't do the aggressive savings, and to be fair, I did do the aggressive savings from my finance days, because even though my income was so high, I wasn't saving. Actually, I probably was saving 60% of my income. I wasn't doing 80 or 70, but I was probably saving 60% of my income, and then just investing aggressively. I don't think I've ever told you guys a story, but this puts this all delayed gratification in perspective. When I was 22, I thought I was going to go to grad school. And so I opened a 529 plan for myself, college savings plan. And I put in $5,000 because New York State has a very good benefit, which is if you are a New York State resident, that $5,000 is also deductible against your state income tax. So I was like, well, I'm going to get this tax deduction. And I put in the $5,000, and I thought I was going to go to grad school. But in the back of my mind, I also knew I had asked the question, what happens if I don't go to grad school? And the question was, well, you can pay the penalty. I believe it's 10% to liquidate a 529, or you can donate it to next direct kin or next in blood. So a spouse or a child. Now, I was single, and I was kept doing 5,000, 5,000, 5,000. And then I realized I wasn't going to grad school. I was still single. Maybe I had met Lisa, but I'm like, I think I'm going to have a kid at some point. This seems like a reasonable idea. So I kept just going 5,000, 5,000, 5,000. Then I met Lisa. We were dating. So kept doing 5,000. I could see a path towards having a kid. We got married. Then I could do 10,000. And I remember by the time Soraya, my eldest, was born, I believe I had put in $80,000 of contribution. So 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, then 10 when we were married. Couple of years we were married. And then I priced out in college inflation my daughter's 11 now, but I priced out college inflation. I use a high number, probably 5%. And then I priced out investment rate returns. I think I used 6%. And basically I was done. And so my daughter would be $500,000 to pay for private 4-year program for her. And with that 80,000, if it grew at 6% a year, we would have $500,000 by the time she went to college. So in many regards, that very much is FIRE. That is that delayed gratification, tax mitigation, long motherfucking games strategy. But I think that my biggest issue with FIRE was that there was a lot of suffering to save that money. And the media really likes to jump on this. There was that Wall Street Journal article where they talk about the brown bananas, where FIRE people would, this is what the Wall Street Journal said, they would go to a supermarket right when it's closing, and they're throwing out the produce that, cleared the expiration date but didn't sell, and they would just use that. And, that's a little bit excessive. Of like, there's a point where you're saving to be prudent and good stewards of your money. And there's another point where you're just causing yourself this unnecessary suffering. So I thought I would see with that FIRE community this kind of unnecessary suffering of frugality. I would also see the unnecessary suffering of optimization, where everything needs to be tracked and measured. I mean, these people look at their net worths every single day. I haven't looked at mine in 12 months, maybe. I know it's lower. Thank you very much. So there's this suffering in tracking everything, and this kind of graspiness and this lack of this desire to control. It just felt very unhealthy to me. Again, I'm projecting my own desires, but I thought that the FIRE community was missing the forest from the trees. And the forest being like, yeah, it's great to retire early, but then what? I said this on my interview with Rick Forster, it's like, the goal has never been to not work. The goal for me has been to work on my own terms. I really enjoy working. And so I got the impression that the FIRE people were just like causing all this unnecessary suffering for themselves. And then they get to this finish line, and then, trust me, as someone that got semi-retired, the fucking universe doesn't all of a sudden make sense for you, right? You still have all of your internal anxieties, your struggles, your relationship with money. If you don't change your relationship with money just because you become financially independent. In fact, it can sometimes get worse because you stop getting your income. Right. I think some of the gains for me over the years have been really recalibrating my relationship with money. And so my beef with FIRE was that this like unnecessary suffering and this frugality and this delayed gratification for what ends? Like, is the goal really to not work, or to like kind of find that meaning, find that purpose, put your life in alignment, do things that light you up, right? If you're going to retire at 40, you have 40 more years on this earth. Like, what are you going to do with that time, right? So that was my issue with the FIRE community. And I think that is, propagated in the media, on Twitter. FIRE is not a huge Twitter thing, I don't think. You see people like Ramit Sethi kind of like pick on them. You see he kind of takes these Reddit threads where they're like, I won't let myself buy the guacamole at Chipotle because it's $3 or $2. But I have a liquid net worth of 7 million or something like that. And so I think that the media and the kind of quick outrage of the internet really highlights these stories. That was the perception that I had going into the conference. Now I get to the conference and I feel like this fucking oddball. First of all, I'm dressed in like, my conference attire. I got those like $300 Japanese jeans and this like perfect hemp shirt and a bracelet. And then, they had a welcoming party, and I think the thing said Costco chic was the dress code, right? And it's not like they're not kidding. They legitimately mean that. And I am not knocking anyone's fashion choices, but let's just say I don't hang out in a place where a lot of folks will own. I mean, probably people wear Costco undergarments or undershirts and things like that, but they're not leaning into Costco as a sense of identity. Right. And so I just found that funny. I think people were also very confused. People looked at me when I said I moved from New York to LA. Like, why would you do that? Because in the FIRE journey, every decision is in pursuit of that financial independence goal, which is funny for me, is that moving to LA is part of my financial independence goal, which was to surf every day. But I think that on paper, the headline number is like, you move from one high cost of living. I mean, if I told these people my rent, oh my God, they would fucking lose their shit. I mean, anyways, so I think people were confused as to why I was there. So I had to explain to them a little bit how I explained. I was like, well, I'm not really part of this fire community. They all read these blogs, Choose FI, Camp FI, Campfire. I've read Mustache, Mr. Money Mustache a few times, and I like it, but I'm not interested in that part of the community. So people were very surprised by me. The other thing that was really interesting was that this group was so warm. They were so warm and so welcoming that when I went in and there was like a networking thing, and I didn't know anyone at this conference except the organizer, Diana, who invited me. When I went in and there was this networking event and where everyone would pick a table, people would wave. They're like, they could see that I didn't have anywhere to sit. I wasn't with a larger group. So they were like, come sit. And it was just incredible how warm and friendly this group of people was. Now, another thing that was, so now I want to talk about this, everything is broken, right? And so as I got to meet people in this fire community, what I realized is like, yes, they are frugal savers. I mean, 80%, someone was telling me about their 80%. But what I admired about it was that I assumed that it came from a place of suffering. But when I spoke to people, it was just like, we don't care about that stuff. Right? And here I was being like, I will never wear Costco clothing to a social gathering. And there it's like, how we look in our fashion choices is not relevant. Like, and it's funny, it's like, like you go to an event around here, like a more chill event, everyone's wearing Vuori, right? It's like $68 t-shirts. There, it's like people are wearing, like a Tool concert shirt or some shirt from a conference that they had attended, like swag that they had gotten. And again, they don't care. And what I thought was really cool was that they don't care and they're not projecting onto you that you should care. They're not on this kind of self-righteous kick. So I just thought that it was really, really inspiring to see people that have really bucked the Western and particularly American trend of hyper-consumerism. Like where I live, people roll car leases every 3 years, so everyone's always driving the newest car. And that shit ain't cheap. Like with inflation, these luxury cars, you're probably $1,500, $2,000 a month. And then there you have someone that's like, I like my Subaru Outback that I bought used and that I've driven for 10 years, right? And that, if you just look at two different choices, right? That choice alone is probably the difference of like $100,000. And then you invest that, it's a difference between many, many more. So it was just the intentionality. And again, no one was, they probably thought I was a little funny for how my spending preferences, but no one was judging me for how I spend my money. So that was the first thing that I found was really, really inspiring, was this trend was we are opting out of hyper consumerism, right? And we are very happy with what we have, which led to the second point, is that I thought that everyone just seemed to live like very simple lives. They traveled, they spent time with their kids, they had hobbies, they worked, they were very curious about making their money work for them. But there was this kind of peace in simplicity. I didn't see that graspy suffering that like, when am I retired? When I retire? I saw it in a few people, but in general, it was just very much like, what it was? It was like, we have a plan for our lives. The plan doesn't conform to society's expectation, and we're going to execute upon it. And so I remember distinctly sitting next to a woman who was in a book club where they read one of the FIRE books. I think the JT Collins one. And in the book club, it was just with her coworkers. And this woman I was talking to, she got a raise, and she took the raise and used it to pay down her mortgage. The people here hate debt, which is funny. I love debt. I love cheap debt. I don't like expensive debt. Again, a very coastal thing. But they take their bonus or promotion raise and invest it into this. They pay down their principal. And she was saying she couldn't understand. Everyone else in her reading group got a raise and got a bigger house. And she, again, there was no judgment in it. It was just like, I like my house. So with my raise, I'm just going to pay down my mortgage. And so you had these people here that were, again, they were teachers and retail managers and so on. Again, I don't know exactly the income, but I suspect not significantly over $100,000. And they were just, again, everyone was like annoyed that the stock market's down 10% this year, but they had a plan and they were executing against that plan. And there weren't, what was so powerful was their agency, and also there's no woe is me. It's like, I own my decisions. I have a plan. I'm going to make it happen. So I thought that was incredible. A few other interesting tidbits that I observed was there were a lot of folks that I realized didn't have kids. And I didn't have the chance to ask if that decision was an economic decision. I suspect for some it was, which breaks my heart, but I also understand that. I completely honor and respect that decision. So there were definitely a lot of people who didn't have kids. That was one thing. And what I noticed was, I think there was still, and I have this too, so this isn't a judgment, it's an observation. There's still a lot of individuality. It's like once I'm done, then like kind of like I go into my cocoon and live my life. And look, I have very much kind of gone into my cocoon and lived my life. But it felt a little bit strange where it's like, I just want to make sure I'm good and then nothing else matters. And this is actually an internal struggle that I'm having myself. It's like, I'm good, but I haven't spent a lot of time helping other people be good, And so that's something that I'm wrestling with. A few other interesting tidbits. There was a gentleman who gave a presentation right after mine, and him and his family would track their food waste. So the average American spends $10,000 on food a year and throws out 32% of it. Either food goes bad, leftovers, or they just bought the wrong thing. So $3,200. And again, in these communities, people are saving. You're getting down to the point of that the $50 extra of saving makes a difference. And so this person gave this talk about how he keeps track, their family keeps track of the waste. And so, for example, if you had, let's say you made an omelet, a 2-egg omelet, and you didn't eat the second egg, and you threw it out. They would never throw it out, but you threw it out. That, let's say, I don't know, what's an egg today? $1.50. That would be $1.50 for that egg, and I don't know, maybe they would throw in 5-10 cents for butter or something like that, or salt. And so they would keep this log. So like one scrambled egg, $1.70. Leftover pasta, 32 cents. And I think that their waste started at $64 in 1 year. And the lowest year, it got to $5.18. And then 1 year, there was like a mishap. Like they found a bottle of tahini sauce that was hidden somewhere and it had expired. And so the following year, it was like 11. It went back up from like $5 of food waste per year. I'm scared to admit to you guys how much food waste I have per sitting. And it jumped to 11 because of this bottle of tahini sauce. It was fucking wild. So that was an interesting story. And again, I looked at that and people were captivated. And for me, it was, not for me. However, what it did make me realize, like, God damn, we throw away a lot of food. We'll go to dinner, we are untethered on the girls fucking order whatever they want, and they eat half of it, and we kind of come from a parenting philosophy like never force a kid to eat. I was forced to eat food, finish my plate, but we come from a more modern philosophy of but you end up wasting a lot. And so it just made me realize, like, man, it just kind of, I was like, we just waste a lot of food. And it wasn't even a financial thing for me, but the realization is like, I don't want to live my life wasting stuff, whether it's food, whether it's time, whether it's things that I buy and don't use. And so that was a very powerful realization. Another thing I'll share is that they had a few of the groups they hang out a lot. And so there was a real sense of community. People had been coming to this conference for 3 to 5 years. They all knew each other. They were excited. They were hugging. They were so happy. And it was kind of like, we are weird. There's this kind of general knowledge, like, we have chosen to live our life in a very weird way. And most of society doesn't get us. So we look forward to hanging out with other people that have made that weird decision. And it was really beautiful to see this kind of power of the in-person community. And I just thought that I thought it was incredible just how they traveled together. They would meet up. There was a real sense of, when you come to my city, stay on my couch type thing. And I think in a world where people are definitely, yearning for community and that in-person contact, I think it was really powerful to see. The last thing I would say on that community part is just the orders of magnitude of spending were so different than what I'm used to. And, so I was talking to a gentleman, I believe he was a counselor or teacher, and they were moving to a suburb outside, not a suburb, a town 2 hours north of Atlanta. And a bunch of financial independence people were moving there. They all knew each other from these conferences, and they were buying these houses. I don't think they were tear downs. They were just like, they just needed renovation. And then they were going to collectively buy a house. I think it was 6 families buying 6 houses. And they were collectively going to buy a 7th house. And that was going to be like a co-working space. And I think some of them were choosing to have kids and some of them weren't choosing. And they were going to, between those 6, they were going to have like 1 lawnmower. And, I don't know what's another one-off thing that you have, 1 power saw, right? And maybe they might even share cars or e-bikes or things like that. And again, I was just like, wow, this is so cool. Not for me, but like, it would be cool to have my version. I guess my version of that is like some fucking bougie country club in Lake Tahoe. But I did realize how fucking bougie I am this whole time. And plus it was in Ohio. I'm just like, I'm such a fucking bougie coastal snob. I don't think I'm snobby, but I hang out around a lot of coastal wealthy people. But I'll leave you with this. The person they bought the house was like $185,000. And I was like, oh my rent's $120,000. And so it just like, again, I was just like, you can be a teacher and retire before you're 40, be a homeowner, and again, have a sense of community. I think they were happy with the schools there. I think this person wasn't planning on having kids, and buy a home for like, think about the simplicity. And again, I'm not saying go buy a house for $185,000, but the house that I rent is 3.3. Which is just like, there's a lot in between there, and there's a lot of peace, and there's a lot of simplicity and joy to be had in there. And so I just want to wrap by saying I was just blown away in this narrative that everyone's fucked and the world is fucked. You had this thriving group of people that were extremely high agency, that had a strong sense of self-knowledge and who they were, and that admittedly were living in a weird way, their words, not mine, and yet had found a sense of belonging in their own value system. Thank you.